Chers auditeurs,
Dear listeners,
bonjour.
welcome to Comdarchipodcast Season 5.
Saison 5, dans le monde fascinant des architectes.
And in the architectural projects.
Je suis Anne-Charlotte Deponte, passionnée d'architecture et docteur des universités en histoire de l'archi.
I am one of the spokespersons of Anne-Charlotte, who is a PhD in architecture history.
Merci.
Thank you.
D'être avec moi aujourd'hui.
To be with us today.
Et
And
maintenant,
now,
lundi en français, place au talent.
and Wednesday, let's talk projects. In English, of course.
Bienvenue dans Comme d'Archi.
Hello, dear listeners. This is Esther on behalf of Anne-Charlotte. Welcome to this Comme d'Archi sport format, which kicks off the 2023 Christmas season. No doubt, bad news for the incarnations of Is No Good or The Grinch, but Christmas is Christmas. Like Black is Black, sang our sacred national Johnny Hallyday. And yes, we have the right not to like it, but some hits are indestructible. The rite, the ordinary, the tradition, the myth, even if they've been debunked a million times, are all part of the construction, however innovative it may be. Do you doubt it? Well, in all honesty, free of contempt and pride, I'm convinced of it. Consider even the cheesiest Christmas sweater. The more it's abused, the more it comes back. Snowmen, reindeer, gingerbread, mulled wine, santons, clementines and stockings under the real tree, the Christmas spirit whatsoever. It can be corny, but never mean. Sometimes rooted in a deep and respectable faith that brings together so many different souls. It crosses space from Provence or the far north to the streets of New York. The bells are ringing, and louder and louder. Can't you hear them? That's Western Judeo-Christian culture, and that's the way it is in our countries, which have even become secularized. Which doesn't mean we can't deeply respect Eastern traditions. Oh, how sweet the orange blossom evaporating from the gazelle horns from the south. What a demonstration of Chinese New Year coming soon in February, etc., etc. Of course, the most important thing is to respect each other's values, humanity, and differences. And this is friends. Because everywhere, forgetting the foundations leads relentlessly to ruin. Whether you're from France or Navarre. Ain't scared, some would say. But our enemies have understood this. Today, tragedy follows tragedy. And rather than dwell on the darker news, where the face of the traitor has come to light, despite the perverse twists and turns that only the sorrowful mind can absorb, let's turn without delay to the stage of Parisian tragedy, to continue the series of theaters we began this time last year. Opening with the Théâtre de l'Odéon seemed an appropriate choice for this Christmas. A classical and modern, beautiful theater that seems small and large at the same time in this urban layout of the 6th arrondissement of Paris, generated on occasion, whether vast or subdivided, where vanishing points have been worked and reworked. The pre-existing focal points were the Foire Saint-Germain, the new École de Médecine, and the Carrefour de Bussy. It was an opportunity for exceptional urban beautification, with the restructuring of old thoroughfares, the creation of new ones, and the construction of a new district. What a beautiful place Paris is today. In the 18th century, the theatre was the cultural hub, an economic breeding ground, and above all, a generator of new urban fabric in major French cities, such as Bordeaux. Paris lagged behind, but soon caught up. In Paris, the city, the Duke of Bourbon-Condé, the king's actors. In general, the project manager was appointed without competition. As for the Odéon, it was King Louis XV who decided in 1773 that the Comédie Française, then housed in the Salle des Machines, should have a theatre worthy of it. The location was to be on the left bank. But the project took a long time to be finalized, and various proposals followed one another. I remember that during my studies, I counted 8 of them. After all these project versions, it was finally King Louis XVI who launched construction in 1779 on the Faubourg Saint-Germain in part of the former gardens and parterres of the Hôtel de Condé, designed by the king's great gardener, Le Nôtre. The architects were Marie-Joseph Père, 1730-1785, and Charles de Wailly, 1730-1798. 3 years in the making, they built a massive antique-style facade with 8 Doric columns and a pediment bearing the inscription Théâtre français in gold letters. Actor Dorival's opening speech salutes the new temple that royal munificence has just raised to the glory of the dramatic art. Munificence, greatness in generosity. For yes, we owe this theatre to our French kings. And so it is. The layers of history are fascinating. No matter what the new surrealist woke entangled in their dried-up perspectives of tabula rasa versus wasteland. Ah yes, allow me to digress once again and mention something that's not too bad at the moment either. The mineral Christmas tree made of glass and steel rather than a natural one for French ecologist-elected representatives. A good idea, no? Savings? Oh, what a great innovative idea. Christmas after Christmas, always the same blinking, orderless shape to the millimeter. What a non-poetic monotony, and no more eco-friendly than a truly functional steel structure that lasts well beyond the term of office. And after, what about the waste? Where? No, it's nothing. My memory is going. L'Odéon, Théâtre de l'Europe, then plays on the monumental character and Doric order, attached to the Greek god Apollo, god of the arts, song, music, male beauty. Yikes, the ugly male, probably white, shows up on the horizon, blows a woke voice. Male beauty, poetry and light. Apollo, conductor of the 9 muses. Apollo is also the god of purification and healing, but he can bring the plague with his bow. Finally, he is one of the principal gods of divination, consulted, among others, at Delphi. He was also honored by the Romans, who quickly adopted him without changing his name, which, as it happens, was not the fate of our theatre. But we'll get to that a little later. So let's get back to the composition of the Odéon first. Monumental, it seems to unfold out of the public foyer, whose columns rise above the vestibule and are accessed by monumental staircases. In the space that serves the public, the stage is set and the audience is shown off. Then, the temple opens onto an Italian-style hall. Everything converges at a single point, the middle of the proscenium. Viewpoints are multiplied and converge. Here, spectators in the parterre are seated on benches. It's a real innovation. The Chevalier d'Aubonne even used it as a couplet in his song, "Hey, what's that to me?" That Molière's theatre company leave the Louvre at great expense to wipe our whistles in the vast candy box. What's that to me? I'm sitting in the parterre. The inauguration took place on April 7, 1782. Marie Antoinette and the court attended. The king's troupe performed Racine's Iphigénie en Aulide. while the seated parterre was a first revolution, the vast candy box, bonbonnière in French, did not meet with unanimous approval. Acoustics and lighting were severely criticized. 2 years passed after the inauguration, and on April 27, 1784, the new theatre finally took off. Hurry, hurry! The historic creation, so often postponed, was performed. La Folle Journée ou Le Mariage de Figaro by Beaumarchais. The theatre was literally taken by storm. The whole of Paris was desperate to attend the wedding. Doors were broken down, iron gates smashed, and even 3 people were suffocated when the offices opened. Grimm's Gazette Littéraire reports, barely half of those who had been besieging the gates since 8 o'clock in the morning managed to get in. Most went in through the back, throwing their money at the doormen. And then, what seems to me to be essential happens. Through the lines, Figaro shoots at the nobility. You took the trouble to be born, and nothing more. Without the freedom to criticize, there can be no flattering praise. Certainly, the nobility is no longer really, in fact, of cloaks and swords. Perhaps still in the west of France, which the future will prove, but that's not enough. And despite appearances, the nobility of the Île-de-France embraced important ideas of their time. Its greatest blindness was undoubtedly its belief in divine right, although the opposite would be astonishing. Whatever the case, Beaumarchais' formulas remain on everyone's lips. The play's cast was judged dazzling and delighted audiences. Louis XVI thought, "This is detestable and will never be performed." Beaumarchais himself was not far from being the most surprised, exclaiming, "There's something crazier than my play. It's its success." In one show, the future Odéon baffled the critics. But more than that, it paved the way for the collapse of the Ancien Régime, to which this crazy day dealt a heavy blow 5 years before the storming of the Bastille. A hard blow, like the misunderstood queen, who dared to stage herself in her little Versailles theatre and play the shepherdess in the Hamlet. As far as I'm concerned, every Republican president, who is needed more than ever today, but who feels a little too much under immunity and yet in a status far removed from that of divine right, every Republican president should learn a lesson from this episode at the Théâtre de l'Odéon. With the Revolution, the fledgling Théâtre Français on the Faubourg Saint-Germain entered a turbulent period. 2 fires, 1799 and 1818, and, unlike Apollo, incessant name changes. Hold on to your hats. 1789, Nation Theatre. 1794, Theatre of Equality. 1796, Odéon. Factual terminology designating the small covered antique theatre. 1808 and 1815, Théâtre of Empress. 1814 and 1816, Théâtre Royal. 1819, Odéon, Second French Theatre. 1821, back to Odéon only. 1959, Odéon Théâtre de France. Since 1990, Odéon Théâtre de l'Europe. History aside, the Odéon remains one of culture's highest pillars. A cult venue, it has won its independence from the Comédie Française. It is, and I quote, "a mythical stage stamped with the seal of shows engraved in the annals of French theatre." This ancestral temple didn't wait to be twice a century old and renamed Théâtre de l'Europe to fulfill its mission of enlivening Europe's dramatic heritage. And with what brilliance! Franck Jouve in 2013 in Paris et ses théâtres. Finally, let's mention Paul Ginisti, director of the Odéon from 1896 to 1906. There are unsuspected curiosities in the Odéon. Did you know that a well has been discovered underneath? The most unexpected objects have been brought up from this shadowy hole. Spearheads, a piggy bank, pieces of black and white flagstones, stones charred in the blaze of the fires, and, last but not least, a surprising find, a monkey skull. Isn't it disturbing to think that beneath the trapdoor that swallowed up the commander and Don Juan at the final moment of Molière's play, there was a real, deep, forgotten dungeon? Dear listeners, thank you sincerely for your fidelity this year. And since September, we've approached the 12,000 monthly download mark. I'm the first to say I'm sorry for the lack of energy in my Instagram posts, for not having been able to meet all expectations. I don't know about you, but as far as I'm concerned, after a rather trying year, I'm hoping to regain that energy. Assuming that current events leave us in peace and that the big bazaar calms down. That public space can be reinvested more serenely. Because that's enough, isn't it? Let's meet again next week for a new issue, far from the drama of Oblivion, on the theme of Architect's Christmas Eve, since Christmas will be in full swing in the world of the living. Until then, take care of yourselves, and why not indulge in a play? Bye.
Thank you for listening. Thanks to Julien Rebours, sound engineer, who is collaborating with us today. Don't forget to tune in to our previews on Instagram at comdarchipodcast. If you enjoy this podcast, don't hesitate to promote it by giving it 5 stars and a little comment on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast platform. And above all, subscribe to listen to all of our episodes for free. See you soon, and until then, take care of yourself.